Michael, we'll let you get started.
All right, so we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gents, I'm Michael Tuzan. I'm from Penn State University. I'll be entering my 12th year at Penn State. I teach human resources, been in HR and the hospitality industry ever since I was a pipsqueak. I believe my first job was washing dishes at a local mom and pop store just down the block when I was 14 years old. I wanted money, and I said, Mom, I want money to go to the summer camp. My mom said, go get a job. So that sparked my interest in the hospitality industry. So I teach HR, and I also do research on a variety of HR issues, ranging from employee selection, training and development, and turnover and retention. Why I think it's good to have this opportunity to be here today is a lot of what we know about HR from an academic perspective comes from what is written about. And it's typically not in the hospitality industry. And then when things are written in the hospitality industry, it tends to be more about the big players, the big brands with, deep pockets. So where this is really good is to kind of learn about HR from what's happening on the ground with smaller, independent enterprises. And I think, this may just be the beginning of something else, because I think there's a big need to benchmark what's going on, to know what are the burning, concerns, of operators, what we're doing right, as well as where could we get better at. So today it's going to be a panel discussion. We have Marilyn and Jim with me. I'll turn it over to both of you just to do a quick intro, and then we'll start with the questions. Before we do that though, so we're going to have Q&A, and it'd be really good if y'all could ask any questions, through the moderator. It'd be really good just to figure out, both what you're doing out there and what are some of your, burning concerns. So why don't we go to Marilyn, and then to Jim.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Marilyn Bushnell. I own a consulting company in the industry called Bushnell & Bushnell Services. However, I come out of the HR industry. I always say I put my HR hat on. I worked for Procter & Gamble as a human resources manager, and for McCormick & Company, the spice manufacturer, as well as an HR manager in a variety of settings, and then left that corporate world to purchase my own inn. My husband and I owned an 18-room inn, so we did deal with staff on a rather regular basis. And sometimes then I say, I throw my HR skills out the window when I come into that 18-room inn, or particularly when I was dealing with my husband face-to-face on HR. So a variety of HR practices, and also as a consultant, I see a variety of HR practices in the various inns that I work with as well.
Thank you. Jim?
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Jim Hasbrook. My experience in human resources began probably I graduated from college and went in the Peace Corps for 2 years. And I was in the Marshallese. I taught English as a second language to Marshallese students. And when I got out of there, I went to work up in Oregon, and I worked in a Job Corps center for about 6 years. And I worked in education and development, and also worked in counseling. And then I graduated into human resources as a personnel assistant specialist, working for National Forest in Oregon. I did that for 3 years, and then I got a promotion to personnel officer. I did a personnel officer in West Virginia for 3 years, and I did one in Arkansas for about 8 years. I thought I'd do 3 to 5 with good behavior. And I ended up there for another about 10 years, and then went to Atlanta, where I worked in employee relations, which is generally doing investigations and conduct issues with employees. I was working for the Department of Agriculture Forest Service, and I graduated in Washington, D.C. When we decided, I began, what I was doing in my career was traveling a lot, and I was staying in hotels, and I started to decide to stay in beds and breakfasts. It just seemed like a little more comfort thing. And after about my third, fourth trip out and staying in a B&B, I came home to my wife and I said, I think we could do this. All we have to do is be nice to people, feed them a good breakfast, and they'll pay our rent. I said, this is a good thing. So that's what we did. When I graduated and I got out of my career and retired, we bought a little bed and breakfast here in Blackstone. We've been operating that 12 years right now. It's a 5-room inn, and we're having a good time. So my HR skills, to some degree, are still, they're standard skills of how you meet and deal effectively with others, and play well together. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, thank you, Jim. And,
Sure.
thank you for being here. Thank everybody for being here. Hopefully we can have, a good dialogue in the next half hour to 40 minutes. So let's start off with, the big broad question. What are the biggest HR challenges that small innkeepers are confronted with today? And there's a little wrinkle to it. I want to know, what are the biggest challenges in general, and if they're new or different pre and post COVID? So kind of like, what are the existing problems or challenges that we're faced with? And then, what are some of the biggest challenges in the wake of the pandemic, and perhaps some that we haven't even thought of? I know there's a lot packaged into that question, but I think it may be a good way to start off.
I'll start because I actually went out and talked to several of the innkeepers that I've worked with over the years. And what I'm hearing, and I think it's fairly consistent, is bringing the employees back in a safe environment. I mean, that's a huge challenge for us today. Making sure that our environment is as safe as it can be for those employees, and providing the right tools and equipment for safety and cleanliness sake. So that's really one of the big challenges. The other challenge is dealing with their wages. Right now, many of them are on unemployment, and certainly with a significant dollars added to that base pay that they receive, getting them back at the right time and providing them with enough hours that it makes it worthwhile for them to return to employment.
All right, so you're saying the employee health and safety issue, then the wages. Before we go into detail on those, Jim, what do you see? And then Rose, maybe if there's anything from the crowd, if you could chime in. So Jim, let's go to you, and then Rose after that, and then we'll.
Yeah, I think that Maryland's onto something with regard to the safety and welfare of the employee. That's the number one item that we have to take care of. Our inn is such that we don't have a regular scheduled period of time that a temporary employee an employee would come to work for us. So it's all on a call when needed basis. As a result, we pay a flat rate. It's a contract with that employee. This is what we'll pay for this block of time. And that employee comes in, and then we'll issue a 1099 at the end of their assignment. And they let them deal with the IRS. So we don't go into an employment or Social Security or any of those areas, because the nature of our employment is such that it's call when needed. And when I worked with the government, we had temporary employee program where we'd hire seasonals that would come to work for us during the course of the summer and into the fall fire season, that sort of thing. But there was a regular scheduled tour. And we had some of our managers want to pay, why can't we just do this on a contract basis? We made it very explicit. When you have a regular scheduled tour, then you got to pay those employees like you pay them, whatever the going wage is, and rate. I said, if you're going to do a contract, then it's got to be on a very much call when needed basis. In other words, I got a project, I'll call them, and then I'll need them, and then I'll let them go. And that's how we operate our workers with our workers. And we've nurtured and developed some real good relationships with those contractors. And so they've been real willing to work with us. It's been very effective.
Now, I'm going to add an HR perspective on that with a larger place. You know, having 18 rooms as an innkeeper, we could not do that. We had
Right.
regular employees. Please, for all of you, to make sure you manage through your state and local wage and hour laws to make sure what you do is legal for what you are doing. I mean, that's really, I have seen inns get in trouble when they pay their employees as defined by employee, a 1099 and pay it as a contract situation. So
You got to follow the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's definitely.
absolutely, you've got to follow those laws. It's really the first place I find innkeepers can get themselves in trouble from an HR perspective.
All right, I want to go back to the employees and the safe, working environment, a little bit. I go shopping, tends to be my favorite pastime. I go out shopping, I wear my mask. And when I'm at the counter, talking to the staff, I'll ask, like, what's the biggest challenge, or what's stressing you out? And they'll say it's guests that aren't wearing their masks, and some of them do feel unsafe in that environment. And I'm wondering what sort of protocols, A, are being advised, and two, what are people doing on the ground, and what are they hearing from their employees?
Well, just in terms of what I've heard from innkeepers is, A, they're requiring their employees to wear their masks. So they're trying to show and model the fact that they're having good safety practices and hygiene and cleanliness practices. And I understand they're putting a lot of signage up. They're softly reminding their guests. There's always the chance and the risk that you're going to have someone who believes this is a bunch of hooey and not comply. It gets very difficult at times, but generally I would say they're providing their employees with as much of the materials and tools and to model and require their employees to model that. But it's a stressful time for, I would say, any employee who's entering in an environment like that.
And one thing that I think would be of value is maybe in a pre-shift meeting is talking with employees about how to deal with guests who may not be compliant with the standards that you want, in your inn. Because we're all concerned about guest satisfaction, et cetera. And the employee's in a position of lower power relative to the guests. And like, how can we politely say, please use your mask in public spaces? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jim?
I've asked them to please use their mask in public spaces. Okay. My effective is being direct and, again, to model the behavior we want to see. Make sure I'm doing it, make sure the folks around us are doing it, and just, again, model it and be polite and courteous.
And I think there is value even just to saying to the employees that work with you, it's okay to politely ask.
Absolutely.
Because
this is one of those cases where the customer isn't always right.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, but I can anticipate some lawsuits coming along the way when either employees aren't following protocol and they get infected because the boss, wasn't adhering to it.
Be tested.
Or, there's going to be, some sort of infection, even when the employees did wear their masks. And if they say that, the guests weren't wearing masks.
Well,
so I think on this side, like, err on the side of caution.
Absolutely. And
I just want to know what you think about this. Do you have any idea?
Your policies and procedures as well. Document, know what you are communicating to your employees and your guests so that when that lawsuit, because they will come along, we know that they will. We've had them, oodles of them in the ADA environment, and they're gonna happen. So good documentation, no matter what kind of situation you have, is always critical to your protection.
One thing that has changed almost overnight is the unemployment rate. So I'd say prior to March 15th, we were looking at an employment rate 4%. Don't quote me on it, but it was low. Now these estimates are much, much higher. Some people are even saying like the true unemployment rate may be up to 20%.
Right.
When unemployment is higher, traditionally employers are in a better position because it's easier to find folks and it's easier to keep folks because there are fewer opportunities available. And I'm wondering, do you find that HR is going to be easier now, or we're just going to have to deal with a whole bunch of other problems?
Again, I went out to a couple to innkeepers and asked that question, and they are not finding that it's easier to find labor. Because many people are still on, let's say, the more lucrative unemployment pay at this point in time. And people are generally scared of going into environments that might be a higher risk for themselves. So based on what I heard, let's say the world is not their oyster in terms of labor opportunity. So they still have to remain vigilant about managing wages at a very competitive level and creating the right environment for someone to want to come to work in that environment. So I haven't heard that from any innkeeper that I have spoken to, where there's a larger variety of individuals in which to select from. And then when you start getting along some of the larger tourism areas, like let's say along coastal environments where they've used a lot of foreign help during the peak summer months or the peak tourist months, they've lost all of those options. So they lost a lot of labor that was coming into this country that is no longer allowed. So that's really limiting a lot of labor choices as well for many small employers.
All right. So it sounds like it's not going to be any easier.
I don't think it is. Please, someone speak up if you have found it differently. But based on what I'm in talking to innkeepers in, whether it be the beach or the mountains, I haven't heard that it's any easier. It's just as challenging, if not more, because they've lost some of the avenues of employment.
This is Rose. Michael, or Marilyn, maybe you can answer this. We had somebody who posted in the chat, and I don't know if you can address this as what is the responsibility of an employer as far as handling their workers? So the comment was, I heard a lawyer recently state that if you would not, it would not fly because becoming to work is a volunteer thing. You do not have to go to work. If you choose to, you take any related risks. I do think there are some responsibilities as the employer is required to ensure. I know here in Pennsylvania, our governor's office and our Department of Health have rather extensive guidelines to employers of what they need to do if somebody gets COVID, how they are to train their staff, signage, all of that. So can you address that, Michael, as far as, again, I think innkeepers are concerned about lawsuits. We do here in Pennsylvania have safe harbor legislation. I know some states have already passed that would protect them from lawsuits. So Michael or Marilyn, I'll let you address that.
Well, I would like to just touch on, like Marilyn, I think you could probably touch on the legality a little bit more. But I think, fundamentally, we do have to take a flexible approach in terms of what are we requiring of employees. Now, where we're inflexible, I would say, is follow the guidelines, follow the CDC guidelines and make sure that you're following what your state and local governments are, discussing. But, and I think just in terms of saying you have to come to work type issues, I can't speak to the legality of it, but I can bet that we really have to take a modified and flexible approach. And which just opens up the other question, how do you get employees from taking advantage of the situation? And I think it just fundamentally boils down to, if you have a good place to work and you're hiring the right people to begin with, you're not going to have, people trying to skirt the system.
Right.
So that's my textbook, kind of the higher level perspective. Like maybe you two could chime in with the nuts and bolts.
The two things that we were always taught in employment is that an employee can refuse to do two things, one of two things. If an assignment is illegal or if it's unsafe, employee can refuse to do it. So the things that we make sure is we don't ask our employee to do anything illegal or unsafe. Now, the issue is being around, we got a pandemic right now that at what point, where do we draw that line? Mike, I was going to ask a question. Does anybody here, how far do you go with regard to, I guess, quizzing guests in terms of where have they been in the last 6 weeks? Have they experienced any illnesses that we should be aware of? I've noticed that in my doctor's office. There's a series of questions they ask, and does that be a reasonable series of questions asked in the lodging industry? That's a question I can't answer.
Yeah, and you know what, Michael, I would also say, let's not just look at the legal approach, because I do believe Rose is correct. There's going to be numerous safe harbor laws that really try and help manage this properly. But again, if you want to be an employer of choice, you also want to be the last thing you need to be known for is the fact that one of the employees got COVID and we think it came from our location. So if you're trying to recruit and trying to retain employees, you're going to create the safest environment possible for all of your employees and of course for your guests as well. It's, you know what, it's the new amenity. It's the new number one amenity. We know we're throwing a lot of the other soft touches and amenities out the window, but cleanliness and safety are the top amenities for both our guests and our employees.
All right, we have a couple of questions from the chat room. I want to touch on this one HIPAA question, which is asking, like, how far can we go? Asking guests about their, personal health and well-being.
There's always HIPAA laws that are out there, and in terms of what you manage or document, I'd be very careful and cautious of. Right now, I would say do what the CDC guidelines are telling you to do. If you, I would ask. I wouldn't keep a lot of documentation, particularly on our guests. And a lot of it's going to be guidelines that they are self-monitoring. So ask the questions, but they're self-monitoring, they're self-communicating. Anybody else?
That is all.
Michael?
At a loss.
I think Mike got stuck.
I think he's
Okay.
stuck.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Now we can-
Okay.
Froze.
Okay, thank you about that. Sorry about that. In terms of finding talent, what can small innkeepers do to secure talent? What are some innovative ways? So when I think about this issue, I try to place it at what could a small inn, like what can they offer compared to other properties?
Right.
Like what are the unique aspects? So maybe there's a branding component. How do we pitch these employment opportunities? because when I was a kid, I didn't even know such things existed.
Right.
So maybe it's like kind of getting the message out there. And then should we return to maybe hiring, high school kids again? I hear that they're not even working these days. What can we do to find folks?
We
Go
really,
ahead,
go
Jim.
ahead. Well, we had a lot of good fortune when I was with the Forest Service. We would bring in students from college and high school that were interested in the field. So you used as sort of an internship, and then development plan for that person. It's not just to get work done. When you're using that resource, that's something that you want to augment their education in addition to helping. It's a win-win sort of opportunity. And we had a real good experience with an intern for one full season. It was about 6 months. And she had a real good experience. She not only helped me clean rooms and help cook some of the, she learned a lot about the business. So those are opportunities that we can present that'll also, that again, will get us work done, but also get a good return for, for a new person down the road.
And I know this is a long-term strategy, but maybe partnering with colleges and universities for these internship programs. I can tell you a college kid won't be wanting to clean rooms, for the full summer. But if it were kind of a rotational type internship with different responsibilities and you can couple it with projects, I think they would jump on it. And there's a real need for opportunities for students these days because a lot of the major players, they're rescinding job offers. They're not taking on interns because they've had to furlough and lay off many of their employees. So they're not bringing on new folks. So maybe that partnering with high schools and colleges, if anybody wants to email me,
Right. I agree.
mjt17@psu.edu, I can forward your information onto our career services.
And just in reading the articles, Michael, the current articles, it's saying the hospitality programs are not having the options in a lot of the big hotels. So that's where you might have that opportunity is talk to one of the more local hospitality programs and see if you can attract someone who is looking for that internship or starter position in your inn. They are potentially out there. The other thing we used to do that I still think is very good is a referral program. Work with your existing employees. If you have good existing employees, they can often refer good existing people that are out there. They want to work with someone who is up to their standards as well. So you might have a referral program with your employees on bringing someone on board. And of course, they're going to go through a hiring and interview and provisional period, which I do highly recommend for all inns to go through a provisional training period with a new employee. But look to a referral program and you might offer a little bonus to them if someone comes on and works out extremely well. It's an option for you to consider.
And I find that the monetary bonus doesn't always need to be that big.
That's right.
It could be a couple $100. It could be a gift certificate.
It's recognition for a job well done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's, a good pipeline. I just want to back up a little bit about targeting internships to students. If you frame it as work in a small environment, learn how to operate and own your own business as well. There's a lot of critters these days. They're very entrepreneurial. They want to own their own thing. They don't know how hard it is at this point. They're more idealistic. So maybe just kind of the way we position them, because I'm assuming working in a small inn, you can learn a lot about how to run a business. True or false? And
in fact, you want to hire someone who has a great deal of flexibility of a role to play. So often, if I was hiring for housekeeping, I didn't want them just for housekeeping. I wanted to see if they had some desk skills or could work in the kitchen and certainly understand laundry as well. So I wanted, in a small place, you want them to have a wide variety of skills. I also, I liked hiring, particularly on the weekends, high school and college age students. They were great for my weekend business, whereas I would say some of the individuals who wanted to be more like part-time help during the week were more like the moms who just wanted that part-time job. And the young kids, I always told them it was the school of life, and the skills that we were going to learn here at the inn are skills that they're going to keep for the rest of their life. They're still some of my best friends whom I just talked to yesterday. So they recognize what skills that I brought to their table and what they take forward into the future, into adulthood as well. So absolutely, a great point, Michael.
All right, I have a true or false question. Okay, true or false? Kids these days don't work as hard as we did when we were younger.
What would we say?
I mean, we're gonna say true, right? So like, you know, younger kids these days, they get a bad rap as not being as disciplined, maybe a little more fickle. And I think some of us may have experienced it. And Rebecca, I totally agree with you. It depends on the kid for sure. And I find, like, through my interactions, like with the students I teach, there is a lot of creativity, a lot of work ethic, you know, with many of them. So I think if we just kind of really take the time to hire the right people and figure out what they want to do a little bit as well. You know, kind of tap into what are their interests. You know, yes, there's work to be done, and you do have to clean the rooms, check people in, but maybe find out innovative project. And I think maybe if we can do that, it can ignite something.
Yeah, I agree. I can't say, I had a number of high school and college students. We were next to a college, so we did have a few, and it was a wealthy college, but we did have a few students come over, and a lot of the kids lived in the neighborhood close to where our inn was located. I always felt like I was able to recruit a lot of those kids. Did I have to teach them a lot? Absolutely. Did they know what a duvet was? Absolutely not. But those are all very trainable. You have to take the time, either yourself or through your existing staff, to really work with these individuals. But in the long run, they were very moldable. I found students that were good in sports and were disciplined in sports could also be disciplined at the end as well. So they brought some of those same skills of learning and persevering in the sports arena into the workplace. And that tended to work very well in training each one of the individuals. So I always felt like that was a really good resource for me. I had to manage a schedule that could drive me crazy at times, because if anything, I would say the students do have a rather busy social life at times, just a lot of different things on their agenda. So I may have hired a few extras so I could juggle that schedule a little bit more. But all pretty decent kids and also very moldable and trainable.
I think you bring up a good point, Marilyn, too, that I'd like to elaborate on. When hiring students that, you know, are involved with other extracurricular activities, you know, whether it be athletics or, you know, the arts, a lot of times when students have been involved with that, those activities kind of instill some discipline, you know, and hard work that can generalize, you know, to the workplace. You know, I know in my experience, like student athletes, you know, and those that are involved with other activities, they tend to be some of the more disciplined students.
I agree.
So, and that discipline may, you know, generalize to the workplace. And then the other point about having to hire more, I find that they're more and more involved with so many more activities. It's like they're trying to do a lot of stuff these days.
They want to go to college. Let's say if they're high school, they're building their resume to get into
Right.
college. Yeah.
So I think you're right. Like we have to be a little more flexible in our scheduling. And I've heard of people even having like little micro shifts. I don't know if that's always, you know, relevant, but really being flexible, maybe in the number of hours and the number of shifts that people work per week.
Right. Very much so. I also found that if I had a family who lived in the neighborhood and there was one, let's say high school student, that next high school student that's coming along in that family might have similar work ethic. So there were a couple of families that, hey, I went through the kids. They grew up, all of them grew up at the inn. And that was actually very successful as well.
Just a time check. We are at 12:10. We have 5 more minutes. So I don't know for our speakers if there's any other points you wanted to make in the last 5 minutes that we have.
All right. I think we have a bunch of points, right, gang?
Absolutely.
Okay. Obviously, you're going to interview folks when hiring. What do you find to be better question to ask, and what do you absolutely advise as an additional selection method? For example, like what are, you know, some better interviewing questions? Let's not ask what your greatest strength is and what superhero you want to be. So I want to know better questions. And then secondly, are you advocating like some sort of work sample, or absolutely saying do reference checks? Like how are we double checking our work to make sure that we aren't just hiring a warm body? You know, because it does require a lot more work than we think.
And I would add right now, the first thing that we do, because we've talked about this so much, is understand what this individual's clean philosophy is. If they're coming to, let's say, an interview with you without a mask and doesn't seem to take those standards very seriously, that's probably an immediate kind of knockdown. So we need to make sure that they start with that. That's going to be a basic. Something we didn't look for before is going to be at the top of our list now. So that would be probably one of the first things. I have to say, I always looked for somebody who can multitask, and someone who was detailed oriented. So when they are relaying something to me, I want to hear how they manage the details of whatever situation I might ask them about. So I always look for multitaskers and detailed oriented, because that defines an in. Because you're small, you've got to be able to multitask a lot of different jobs. Mm-hmm. And because we're at a higher standard, and we hold ourselves to a high standard, it's all in the details. And sometimes I can't write all of those details down, but I need them to look out for all of the guests and all of the fine features of the property itself. Jim?
I would say one of the key elements in doing reference and background checks, I would call an employer, a former employer, and say, is this person a money back guarantee? And I have to if there was a long pause at the end of the question, that usually gave me my answer. Maybe oversimplistic, but it's really is how well did they work with other people?
I'd also suggest don't be afraid to use a provisional period.
I'm going to get to that. That's the other thing, is if you use a provisional or probationary period, understand that person is at their very best behavior.
Yeah.
They're at the best behavior you're looking at. So during that provisional, if there's, all of a sudden they're coming in late, those are things that, once in a while, I understand that, but it starts to become a pattern, and I consider a pattern once or twice a week. That would be a real warning sign that they're not taking it serious. So those are the elements that I think are two that were keystone for me.
And from a provisional training period, have them work with yourself and have them work with a fellow employee, because that employee can give you a perspective as well. If they come down going, oh, I don't know about this one, that's going to give you a perspective, because they're going to deal with the employee very differently than they deal with you
Yes.
as well.
All right, quick question, Jim. In terms of the provisional period, are you recommending 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 weeks, 3 months?
I'd say 6 weeks.
Okay.
Got to be able to know something within that period of time. It's more than just, you know, I mean, I'm going to give them some start points.
And a lot of times even 30 days will do it. So 30,
Sure.
you know, I think 30 days to 6 weeks would be reasonable. Absolutely. And they need to understand what that provisional, what that means. A lot of individuals might not. You have to make that clear and upfront that there's, that this is an evaluation timeframe for them. And I see a number of innkeepers who do use that as a good tool.
Give them feedback is really important. You don't just assume they know what they're doing. Give them feedback and communicate.
Okay, we are at 12:15, which they've asked us to kind of wrap up our sessions on time. Marilyn, Michael, Jim, are you okay in providing your email address for the people that are on the call that might have a few extra questions afterwards?
Absolutely. Mine's easy. It's my name. It's Marilyn, Marilyn, at MarilynBushnell.com. So Marilyn at MarilynBushnell.com.
I'm typing mine into the chat room, mjt@psu.edu. Michael Joseph 217 at PennStateUniversity.edu.
I'll put mine in as well.
Thank you all for coming. Fun fireside chat.
All right.
Stay safe, stay sane.
See you in the next Zoom room.
Okay.
See you on the backside.
All right.
Jim, before we close out, I don't see your email yet. Did you type it up?
No.
Well, if you want to just tell people before we close out
GraySwanIn@yahoo.com.
say that again?
GraySwanIn
At Yahoo.
at yahoo.com.
Okay.
All
Perfect.
right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye. So, Marilyn and Jim, how do you think it went?
I think fine. I wish I had some notes for myself, and I probably could have had that as a presentation, just so people would have a document to go away with.
Yeah.
Typically in a panel discussion, this would be great. This is exactly what we would do if it were a live presentation. And typically don't have materials that we're presenting at that point, but maybe in Zoom, you know, when you do something like this, do people like looking at something a little bit more? I don't know your thoughts. You're probably on this far more than I am.
I thought, you know, as a first time doing it, you know, it wasn't bad. You know, I thought it went pretty well. I know we're still being recorded. So, you know, thumbs
Okay.
up.
Yeah.
I think,
Don't worry, we'll crop all that out, guys.
you know, I think just maybe, you know, if we ever passes, do such thing again, a little more focused, you know, because we had like 9 questions,
Right.
you know, listed. I think maybe we
In
went
a
through
very short period of time.
Yeah, we went through maybe three or 4 of them.
Right, right.
Our audience was what 12 people?
Mm-hmm.
And that includes us.
Well, it's 12 people, but it's going to be recorded. So many people don't come in live. They're going to watch later.
Yeah,
Right.
and we still had 60 plus in the other room.
Okay. So I think it would be good. Like, I really think some HR benchmarking would be good.
I
I
agree.
don't know how receptive the membership is to completing surveys. I know a lot of us have survey fatigue,
Right.
but I think, I don't know, a relatively short, you know, medium-sized survey would be really good to benchmark what's happening.
I'd love to work with you on that, Michael. Yeah. Heather, put that in.
We'll do.
Like, I don't know, I mean, I'm not affiliated with the organization, so I don't have the muscle and the power, but I think that would be a really valuable project to do.
I agree.
Heather?
Don't have that.
Yes.
Marilyn and Jim, if you want to play
Agreed.
like maybe we could set up a phone call.
I'd like that.
Okay,
I'd love to do it. I'd be happy to work with you on it.
You know, and you can kind of educate me a little bit on the membership and I don't know, just, you know, how amenable they are to certain things,
Right.
you know, what actually they want to know. You know, there's things that I want to know, which may not be what they want to know.
Well, and again, in particular now with post-COVID, you know, managing it now in this world, I think that's why I went out to innkeepers. I said, I've been to a couple of inns during this time, but I'd also started talking to them just to say, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, to get their input as well.
See, and maybe like things could be posted, like similar to how things are like posted on LinkedIn, like short little stories or something.
Right.
Or short little snippets. Hey, here's a focus on recruiting. Here's a focus on training. Here's like some top tips on COVID.
I
Where
like
the data, you know, the data may be collected all at once, but we just take we present it more in fun-sized.
yeah, bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
To get to the next presentation, do we hit leave meeting?
Yes.
And then we can just, and is Chip next?
Let's see. Chip is next, and that should be. Let me pull it up for you so that you can get there a bit
I'm
easier.
gonna slide out, guys. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, Jim.
Bye, Jim.
Bye now.
Michael, you might want to hear Chip because he's president and CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association.
Okay, how do we get to Chip?
I just put the Zoom link in there.
Okay, cool. Marilyn, can you reach out to me or should I reach out to you? How you want to play this?
Reach out to me, sir.
Okay, so I'll reach out to you and like maybe a chat. That's my laundry.
Okay.
Maybe a chat in a couple weeks.
I'd love it. Great.
Okay, thank
Sure.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Heather. Bye, guys.
Bye.